Good evening to those bored enough to watch. In a previous video, I discussed Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach Ruin and the many things I liked and disliked about it. Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted 2 released shortly after the Ruin DLC, and it serves as a paraquel of sorts to it, as the two games are interconnected in various ways despite them being distinct enough to stand on their own as separate experiences. This game makes a lot of improvements to the foundation established in the first Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted game, but I also believe that there are some slight imperfections in certain areas as well. So in this video, I want to discuss this game, everything I liked, anything I may have disliked, and why I would recommend this game to you. So with that said, let's discuss Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted 2. Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted 2 mostly follows the same structure as the first game, as you're loaded into a hub world where you're then given a terminal to select mini-games to play from. In this game, there are a total of 40 of them, grouped into different sections of the game. Some differences between this game and the previous is that this game gives you the option to move around the hub world and interact with the various toys and equipment within, which I thought was a decent novelty as it allows the player more freedom to move around and do as they please. Another difference is that in the first game, you could only beat the game once you completed all of the minigames and their blacklight mode variants. This is not the case with this game, as you don't need to finish every level. To get the main ending, you'll need to play levels and collect what is known as Fazcade figurines, which is obtained by progressing through the game. You can find one in each section of the game, which does mean that while some sections of the levels of the game are optional, you will need to at least visit and play through a majority of each section's contents at least once, as levels are unlocked by naturally progressing through the game. In this video, I'll only discuss majority of the main content needed for the main ending that it leads to, as while there are some interesting things to see as extra content, it is ultimately optional and not needed for the main ending, unlike in the previous game, as now it's instead needed for an alternative ending instead. I think that this is a much better approach to the game's structure, and it fits this game much better, as this game's contents are a lot more varied compared to the previous entries, at least in my opinion. This is because majority of the first game's levels were harder renditions of each other, with some slight variations being introduced incrementally. However, in this game, there's a lot more variety in the game's levels, as while some of them follow the same basic premise, it's executed differently to at least retain some degree of variety within them. Hence, I think that it makes a lot more sense and is a lot more preferable to not make the player engage with everything that the game has to offer for the main ending, as had the game done this, I personally would have felt as though that the experience would drag on. Hence, I can appreciate the adjustments that this game makes to the pacing to accommodate its newer and varied content compared to the previous game. In addition, the first game contained recreations of prior Five Nights at Freddy's games, and while there were some outliers to this, it was committed to being a faithful recreation of those games in the world of VR. That game also sourced a lot of its material from Five Nights at Freddy's 1, 2, 3, and 4, with some animatronics and other minigames included as well. This game appears to mostly source its material from Five Nights at Freddy's sister location and Security Breach. I can somewhat understand that there's very little representation for Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator and Ultimate Custom Night, as while there are some prominent aspects of that for the former, as UI and gameplay elements from that game are incorporated into a few menus and minigames in this one. They are both more direct sequels to previous entries in the series with mostly the same animatronics. Furthermore, Ultimate Custom Night is exactly what its name implies, so I can understand why there may not be anything for that game here as well. This game also has harder renditions of levels, much like the previous game. You don't unlock it until you get further into the game. After completing around 15 mini-games, you'll eventually win a Faz Wrench, similar to the one Cassie used in the Ruin DLC for Security Breach. You can then use this in the hub world to charge a conduit and enter a room containing an AR world inhibitor. When turning that off, the game reveals that you'd been in the AR world with the Vanny mask for the entire duration that you'd been playing up until that point, and with the Vanny mask off, you can now play the harder versions of pre-existing levels. It's worth noting that the easier renditions of these levels become inaccessible with the mask off, and vice versa. The inclusion of the Faz Wrench implies that you're playing as the father of Cassie, who is the protagonist in Security Breach Ruin. This is because in that respective DLC, Cassie mentions that her father has a Faz Wrench when you first obtain it. This implies that her father is a technician mission for Fazbear Entertainment, and it would also explain why she is familiar with it when using it in that game. I think that this inclusion alongside other aspects do a really good job with tying into the Ruin DLC for Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, as these elements were really interesting to see in this game. In general, I think that this game's structure and layout make for a fun and well-paced experience, as the game ensures that there's plenty of things to do while not making it seem overwhelming. The game also ensures that the experience doesn't drag on or feel artificially long, as while majority of the game's content is mandatory for getting the main ending, you're not forced to do everything that it has to offer, which is worth appreciating. It makes the game well-paced while still leaving enough things to do for completionists or those who want to get the alternative Princess Quest 4 ending. The backstage section of the game begins with arts and crafts, with Sun and Moon in the daycare. You're tasked with things like painting, in which you need to color a picture in a way that matches with an image shown on the monitor. You're under a time limit when you do this, so it's important to do this quickly to prevent being jump scared. You also need to make a paper pal that resembles the one seen in the image, which can be done by finding body parts and other cosmetics with a gun, which you can then use to shoot at the body parts shown on the board behind Sun. You also need to switch between different boards to find the right one at times. Eventually during the minigame, the lights will begin to flicker, and you need to quickly complete the minigame before Moon arrives and attacks. To make this more difficult, the paper pal you need to make is a lot more complex too, as you'll need to begin coloring the body parts and cosmetics too. The salon is split into two different minigames. The first one is where you need to do the makeup of 5 different staff bots under a time limit by giving them various things like hats, glasses, earrings, necklaces, and other cosmetics alongside matching their makeup to the one shown on the monitor. In this particular minigame with the staff bots, you need to ensure that you don't get 3 of these wrong, as you'll be jump scared if you do. The next minigame sees you needing to do Roxy's makeup and give her cosmetics. This rendition adds a new mechanic, which will see Roxy get angry if you don't look at her. This means that you need to ensure that any time you spend looking at the monitor or searching through the mannequins for cosmetics is short, to ensure that you don't anger her too much. This is because on the monitor you'll see a bar which indicates Roxy's anger. If this bar fills to the maximum, then she'll attack you. Either way, you need to do this 3 times before you win the minigame. There is a harder version of this minigame, but you do the same thing with a ruined variant of Roxy, with the added mechanic of needing to calm her down with a newly given Roxy talkie when she begins having a meltdown. During her meltdown, her anger meter will increase significantly, which means that you need to ensure that you calm her down quickly. In general, I thought that the backstage offered some decent content to the game. While these minigames have the same basic structure of needing to do something under a time limit, I do think that there is some degree of variety incorporated within, as there's different mechanics to be mindful of, such as Roxy's patience, or the different tasks required of you during the minigame in arts and crafts compared to the one in the salon. Food prep is the second section of the game, where you need to play minigames related to working and serving in a restaurant. The first minigame sees you playing as a server in L Chips. For this minigame you need to serve food to staff bots under a time limit. These orders gradually get more complex as the minigame proceeds, which requires you to be able to multitask with doing multiple things, like preparing drinks and other things to be able to make the most of the time you're given to serve everyone. You need to serve foods like corn, rice and beans, drinks and also other hot foods which see you needing to place them in a microwave and input a code correctly to heat it. If you get the order wrong, the staff bot will flip the plate over, hence forcing you to start the order over again, which wastes valuable time. The second minigame replaces the hot foods with pizza that you'll need to make for the staff bots. Occasionally, they'll ask for pizzeritos, which requires an extra step in the process of making them, as once you make the pizza, you'll then need to place it into another compartment to turn it into a pizzerito. Much like the previous rendition of this minigame, these orders gradually become more intense over time. This rendition of the minigame is somewhat more manageable than the previous, since a pizza is always guaranteed to be ordered by a customer because it's the only thing they can get. Hence, it's actually somewhat more manageable if you already have the dough ready prior to an order, as then the only thing you need to do is add the sauce and place it in the cooker. In this rendition of the minigame, Glamrock Chica also becomes a threat, as you're now punished by a jump scare from her if you get the order wrong. This makes the experience more tense, as you're now under more pressure to get the order correct. In general, I thought that these minigames in the food prep section were decent experiences that provided a tense and engaging experience. I thought that the minigame with making pizzas did a good job of building on the foundation that the normal rendition with the staff bots established, as more threats and hence pressure were added to incentivize you to get the order correct. Staff Only is the title of the third section of the game, with the first minigame being called Cold Storage. This minigame is reminiscent of the pods and service minigames from Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted. It sees you needing to repair Glamrock Freddy by taking apart his face and other body parts in order to take out a birthday cake stuck in his chest compartment. compartment. You'll also need to melt ice off his arms as well. I think that this minigame was somewhat of an improvement over the first entry's rendition of the parts and service minigames. In that game, you needed to wait for the hand unit to tell you what to do, even if you were already familiar with the steps. This would become somewhat cumbersome, especially if you were playing the minigames again due to having died or something of that nature. It would mean that you would have to wait around to be told what to do, which while harmless for a first time playthrough, or even a few times in general, it would eventually become tiring for some. This game replaces the hand unit verbally telling you what to do with a monitor that shows you what you need to do, which means that you don't need to wait around. If you already know what to do and the order to do it in, then you can do it as fast as you wanted without being held back by needing to wait for the hand unit's cue. I do think that the images shown can be a bit vague and difficult to understand at times, especially if you are playing for the first time, but that could just be specific to me. Either way, this is a small but meaningful improvement that I think is worth appreciating. First aid is the next minigame. You need to provide medical assistance to help you. To do so, you need to assess the problem and then follow the instructions shown on the monitor to correctly provide treatment. During this minigame, you'll find that the TV will begin playing an advertisement and you'll need to use the remote to turn it off because of the noise it makes, which attracts animatronics to your office. Furthermore, Helpy will begin screaming from time to time, and to make him stop, you need to use the gas mask, as failure to do so in time will see you get attacked by an animatronic because of them being drawn to you by the noise. In order to ward off animatronics, you also need to find which vent they're coming from, stop the noise, and then stare at them as they leave. If this criteria isn't met, then you'll die. This minigame appears to take elements from Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator, as much like that game, you need to keep watch of two vents to prevent anything from jumping out at you, while also needing to continue to complete the tasks in the middle of the office. It's an interesting way to adapt elements of that game into something new. Fizzy Faz is the third minigame in this section. It sees you needing to prepare drinks shown to you on the screen. This minigame requires you to manage multiple things at once. This is because on the cameras you'll see staff bots working on supplying you with the stock needed for ingredients, which can range from protein, acid, caffeine, sugar, and salt. If you overwork the bots, they'll eventually stop working and demand a break, as indicated by the icon on the controls becoming orange and them stopping their work on the cameras. If you leave them in that state for too long, they'll eventually leave to try and attack you in your office. When they arrive is completely random to my knowledge. They'll either arrive immediately or wait for a few moments. Either way, when you see them at your window, you need to initiate a lockdown, which will stop all the other staff bots from working and reset everything to normal. This sequence takes a few valuable seconds, which could be detrimental to your order if you don't have the needed stock for an ingredient. This adds pressure because you also need to prepare the order under a time limit, and if you fail to prepare the order in time thrice, you'll be attacked. The way to prevent staff bots from attacking you is to give them a break when they demand one, which will momentarily halt the production of the ingredient they're making before going back to normal. This is important to bear in mind because the lockdown sequence can only be used 3 times, which means that you'll need to use it wisely. There are other things to keep track of. For example, the stock levels of your ingredients need to be regulated, as if the staff bots make too much of an ingredient and overflow your current stock level, the entire batch will become contaminated, which means that you'll need to dispose of it. This would be detrimental to completing orders in time, which means that you're given incentive to manage your stock levels by keeping said stock levels of your ingredients in a middle ground of not being too much and not being too little. You can do this by taking a cup, filling it with any excess ingredient and trashing it. Sometimes during the minigame, a staff bot will arrive at your window and demand a secondary order, which means that you'll have to stop what you're doing and tend to them. If you don't make their order in time, they'll attack you. While this can add pressure to the minigame, you can initiate the lockdown sequence to get rid of them if you're able to afford it. Glamrock Chica is another threat that you'll need to keep watch of. During the minigame, she'll hinder production of ingredients by going to where their production is situated and consuming them for herself, hence halting their production. This will eventually escalate to her arriving at your office, and if you don't initiate the lockdown sequence in time, then she'll attack you. The way to keep Chica away from you and the production of ingredients is to ensure that she is always in the disposal room. You can do this by trashing drinks, which ties into the fact that you'll need to get rid of excess ingredients, hence giving you more incentive to keep track of your ingredients and ensure that you're regularly clearing out any excess. I think that this minigame is well designed and engaging, although it can be really intense. At first it may be difficult to wrap your head around, and it took me a few attempts to actually complete it. However, once you understand how it works, you can eventually complete it with enough attempts. I think that the staff only section had some really decent minigames that did a good job of improving and adapting elements from previous games in the series while also introducing something new and engaging. beginning. The Fazcade is the 4th section of the game, with the first minigame being titled Bonker Bon. It sees you needing to hit a bonbon and bonnet to score enough points to win each round. Failure to do this will result in a jump scare. Furthermore, the plush babies will also eventually begin spawning as well, and when they do, you have a limited amount of time to hit them before they jump scare you. DJ Music Time is the next minigame, which sees you needing to listen to the music track given to you by the DJ Music Man. You then need to replicate and submit it to him. This is made somewhat easier for you as the monitor shows different icons and images depending on the music track being played, which means that you need to match that for yourself when submitting it. You have a limited amount of time to do this, and you also have 3 chances to replay the DJ's track for referencing. Mini DJ Music Men will also begin appearing as a way to distract you, and when they do arrive, you have a limited amount of time to use the Fazcam to get rid of them before they attack you. This serves as a distraction since they may take your attention away from trying to study the Music Man's track, which means that you may not remember it when trying to replicate it, and this could be detrimental since you'd have to use one of your limited chances to replay it. Bonnie Bowl is exactly as it sounds. You play a minigame centered around bowling. Although there are additional threats that can spawn in during the minigame, one of them is Moon, who will spawn above you on the roof, which prompts you to shine your light at him to make him leave. A plush baby may also spawn in and begin running towards you. To ward it off, you need to throw your ball at it. If you manage to aim for the plush baby, you will become stuck to the ball and hit the pins. Another threat is the rabbit above the pins, which will begin coming towards you, and you need to throw the ball into its mouth to make it stop and go back. The next one consists of alligators arriving and disrupting the path of the ball. This one isn't as much of a threat and more of a hindrance. Vazablast is a minigame that sees you needing to aim and shoot at targets in front of you. In general, I enjoyed the minigames seen in the Fazcade section of the game. They were a lot less tense than most of the other content in the game, as even if there are still threats present, they are mostly simple to ward off. I think that this is worth appreciating as it serves as a nice break from the usual tense nature of these minigames. The ticket booth is the next section of the game. There's only really one minigame you need to play here, which sees you needing to fix a carousel. During the minigame, you'll need to fend off Moon, who'll be lurking in the surrounding area. He'll gradually move closer to you as indicated by the sound he makes. To ward him off, you simply need to shine the light into his face. Spotting him will gradually get more difficult as the minigame proceeds, and you repair the carousel more and more. This is because as you do so, the carousels begin to move, which means that Moon can now hide on them. Furthermore, he is also now a moving target, which could make it more difficult to keep the flashlight aimed at him. Repairing the carousel involves 3 tasks. One of them involves replacing fuses. The second sees you needing to replace knobs and adjust them to their correct level. The third sees you needing to repair circuit boards by inserting coloured pins into them and using a soldering gun. After attaching it to a wall, you'll then need to survive against Moon for a little bit longer before the minigame ends. The harder version of this minigame is needed to obtain the Faz Force figurine, in which it's significantly more difficult due to the environment being on fire, which may make it more difficult to spot Moon, who's also been replaced with Jacko Moon, who has a colour palette designed to blend in more with the fiery surroundings. In general, I thought that this was a decent and enjoyable section of the game. It's fairly short and easy to get through, but other than that, I don't have as much to say about it. Sister Location is the 6th and final section of the game, and its material is sourced more directly from Five Nights at Freddy's Sister Location. Ballora Gallery is a recreation of its respective section from the 5th game, as you need to crawl through Ballora Gallery to reach the breaker room. When you hear Ballora's music, you need to stop moving and wait for her to leave, which is indicated by the sound of her music box stopping. If you don't, then she'll hear your movements and kill you. During the minigame, the mini-arenas will also eventually try and attack you, in which you need to stop them by grabbing them as they move towards you and throw them away. The breaker room is also a recreation of that respective section from Five Nights at Freddy's Sister Location, where you need to ward off Funtime Freddy by using a tape recorder. There is a slight difference seen in the rendition here, as you instead need to fill gauges by flipping the correct lever, as opposed to restoring power like you did in the original game. The office section is split up into 4 separate minigames, with each one being against different threats. The first is solely against Enid, where he'll try and reach you from the doors to your left and right and the vents in front of you. You need to watch him on the cameras to know where he'll come from and close that respective door when prompted. It's worth noting that it's best to try and wait a few moments after closing the door and successfully shutting Enid out, as he will linger there for a few moments. This is important to note because if you're not aware of that, you could accidentally open the door while Enid is still there, which would result in death. When you reach 6 AM, you'll win the minigame. The next minigame is against Ballora, the mini-arenas, and the Biddy Babs. Ballora will try and come through the doors to your left and right. When you see her arriving, you need to close that door and wait for her to leave. The mini-arenas will try and hinder you by stationing themselves on the buttons for your doors, disallowing you from closing it. You need to grab them and throw them off. Furthermore, the mini-arenas will also try and tamper with the power, so when you see the warning sign on your monitor for the cameras, you need to find which room they're in and shock them. The Biddy Babs will also try and tamper with the power, hence requiring the same measures. arenas. Furthermore, unlike the mini arenas, they'll also try and kill you by coming through the vents, hence requiring you to close that door when you see them. The next minigame is against Funtime Freddy, Funtime Foxy, and Funtime Chica. Funtime Freddy will summon Bonbon after you, in which when he does this, you'll see him at the hallway for your doors or at the very end of the vent, as indicated through his glowing eyes. He'll wait for a few moments before jump scaring you. This is one of many incentives to manage your power during this minigame, as if you close the door too early when Bonbon arrives, you'll simply be wasting power since you'd have it closed for longer than you need it to be. There is some indication that you can look out for with Bonbon, as when you see both of his arms raised and he's no longer waving them at you, it means that he's about to jump at you, which is your cue to close the door. Funtime Foxy will remain in the Pirate's Cove and undergo a series of phases before running for your office. It's worth noting that Funtime Foxy can arrive through either of your two hallways, which means that you need to consistently watch the cameras to know which one Foxy is going to come through. You'll also need to react quickly to the cue to close the door as well. On your desk, you'll notice that there's a cupcake. You're able to move this to either the left or right side of your office, and Funtime Chica will come to the door situated on whatever side the cupcake is on. Once Chica arrives at your door, she won't leave once you hand her the cupcake, which will cause her to momentarily leave. When she comes back for a second time, she'll instantly kill you if you don't close the door. The first time she arrives, she'll simply stand at the door, and if you don't close the door quickly enough, block the button for closing the door until you give her the cupcake. In my experience, it's best to just keep that door closed before she has a chance to block the button, and worry about whichever side she's not on instead, as giving her the cupcake will only result in death later into the run when she comes back. To keep Chica away from your office, it's important to regularly move the cupcake between the left and right sections of the office to continually lure her through the hallway. It's best to watch where she is on the cameras, and when you notice her getting too close to your door, you should move the cupcake to lure her to the other side of your office. It's generally best to keep her away from your door for as long as possible, as keeping one door closed does mean that you'll have to conserve your power more, as it will be used up more often. She may inevitably arrive if you forget to check where she is, but if you're far enough into the night and conserve the rest of your power well, then there is a chance that you can beat the night regardless. The last minigame in the office is against Baby and the Plush Babies. During this, you'll need to complete 3 minigames assigned to you in a random order. One of them is titled Red Light, Green Light, where Plush Babies will try and come to your office through both doors and the vent. To stop them from coming any closer, you'll need to shine your light at them. Another minigame you'll need to play sees you needing to check the cameras to find a plush baby and shock it under a time limit. They can often be difficult to spot, so it's important to inspect the cameras closely. The last minigame you'll need to play is titled Flashlight Tag. If you're familiar with the Plush Babies' minigame from the Dark Room section in the first Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted game, then I think you would be familiar with this one too. This is because it follows the same premise of the Plush Babies having spawn locations that they'll spawn in at random. You'll then need to find and shine your light at them to make them leave under a certain time limit, or they'll kill you. I think that this rendition is an improvement over the first game. This is because in that game, your flashlight had a battery which restricted how long you could use it for. This, combined with the fact that the Plush Babies subjectively had too many spawn locations that they could spawn in at random, made the minigame way too dependent on luck. It was by far one of the more unenjoyable sections of that game, and it's significantly improved in this one. For one, the flashlight can now be used for as long as you want. Secondly, the area you're in is also more smaller and contained, which makes the Plush Babies easier to spot. The Plush Babies can spawn in the halls and the office, but despite this they have less spawn locations, which makes the minigame way less dependent on luck and more of an enjoyable experience, at least in my opinion. In general, I thought that the sister location section of this game was an enjoyable experience that faithfully recreated elements from that respective title in the series. As previously mentioned, this game ties into Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach Ruin, and it's heavily implied that it serves as a paraquel of sorts to that game, since it's implied to take place after the events of Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach but before its Ruin DLC, with the Fast Force ending tying into it. After collecting all of the figurines, the ending plays with a hand of who appears to be Glitch Trap appears to emerge from a recharge station before staff bots attack you. Shortly after this, the game cuts to the perspective of the staff bot who gave Cassie the Vanny mask during the events of the Ruin DLC from Five Nights at Freddy's Security Breach, potentially implying that it was given to her against the will of whoever we're playing as, regardless of whether the protagonist is Cassie's father or not. Either way, we watch as Cassie takes the mask, inspects it, and just as she puts it on, the credits begin to roll, hence ending the game. As expressed throughout this video, Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted 2 provides a mostly enjoyable experience that improved, expanded, and built upon the foundation left by the previous Help Wanted game. However, I do think that the game has many imperfections, the main of which being that it can be really unclear with what you're supposed to be doing at times. An example of this is with the monitor in the cold storage minigame, among many others. I think that it's something that could potentially be improved upon. Either way, with my critiques and compliments in mind, I would recommend Five Nights at Freddy's Help Wanted 2. So there's the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. I don't have as much to say in this outro. This video was a lot bigger than I expected it to be. If you want to view the list of games I want to make videos about in the future, you can always do so through the link in the description. Additionally, if you want to follow me, then my socials will be linked in the description, as well as any afterthoughts or messages I may want to add. With that, I haven't really got much else I want to say, so I'll see you all in my next video. I hope you all enjoyed the video, and I wish you all a very pleasant evening.